Hello friends, welcome to another reel by Bharat Raghu. Today we would be looking at socialism and secularism, as there's been a lot of talk recently the past 2 weeks going on without going into the political context, but there has been there has been talks of socialism and secularism from all sides, and we thought let's revisit these two terms in general, what they would mean, and also look at what Bose has had to say on it. So this is one of his collected works, Call of the Motherland, put together by Sugata Bose and Sisir Bose. So this is volume 5 of Netaji's collected works. So we'll be looking at some of his pointers and see what he had to say about secularism and socialism. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, what is secularism, socialism? See, there are lots of definitions. To put it in a simple way, the European way would be secularism is where the church and the state are separate. So basically the government or the state, whatever is ruling, doesn't have, the state is basically atheist. The state is atheist, meaning the church is separate from the state. So the state has nothing to do with the church matters and the church has nothing to do with the state. So basically that is what is the European classic definition of secularism. Of course, in India, secularism broadly also means, as put in the preamble, as we the people, and it says that we want to build a secular, socialist, democratic, sovereign. So those are the words. So secular in India means respect to all religions. Basically, all religions have equal weightage, and there are articles in the constitution which give rights to all the religions, irrespective of whether it is a majority or it's a minority, depending on the numbers of the followers. It gives every religion and its followers the right to practice and preach, basically propagate the religion. So that is secularism, equal respect for all religions in India. Socialism in, again, going back to the classical European model, socialism would basically mean that a state where the workers basically, or the workers and the peasantry, have control of the means of production. A socialist state would be where capitalism or the big business don't rule, don't call the shots. It is basically the toiling workers and the peasantry. There could be different models of socialism. There could be a model of say the Soviet model, which was where the workers state was established by a revolution, which then took over all the means of production. That's one. But there could also be models of socialist social democracy, in like how you have a welfare state concept in Norway, Finland, Norway, Finland, basically the Scandinavian countries, and also as well established of the welfare state model in Britain, like the NHS, and then you have France, Germany. So, basically the welfare state model of socialism under a capitalist framework, and the other is the Soviet. So in India, again, coming back to socialism, it's a broad term. In India, it basically means that the same thing, that it is equality, the equality of all sections of people, irrespective of the economic background they come from. So India should strive, as put in the directive principles also, that to be a socialist nation where the haves and the have-nots, the gap between the haves and the have-nots, the schism should not be widened beyond, the efforts of the state have to be to reduce the schism between the haves and the have-nots. That's socialism. So let's now look at Bose. So because we are specifically interested in what he had to say about these two terms. So this is collected works. The chapter basically is the fundamental question, Gorar Katha, the fundamental question. So in this, he addresses many aspects. So one interesting thing, what he talks about is, he says, I have already hinted that I plead for a coalition between labor and nationalism. This is page 245. So he's saying, I plead for a coalition between labor and nationalism. I am using labor here in a wider sense to include the peasants as well. So that's what he says. And he actually goes on to say that the Congress time and again we have passed resolutions regarding the desirability of organizing labor, but much has not been achieved in that direction. So he basically is trying to say there has to be a coalition between labor, which is basically the working class, and the peasantry, and the goals of achieving nationalism, which is an independent national republic. And he also says, for example, very interesting, he says communism, for instance, which is in 244, is not a Western institution. He says among the Khasis of Assam, for example, he says, to whom I have referred, private property as an institution does not exist in theory even today. The clan as a whole owns the entire land. I am sure that similar instances can still be found in other parts of India and also in the past history. So he says communism as such is not a Western construct. It is the concept of the clan holding the land. So there have been instances. So he basically says, and there's one more interesting, he says basically as long as India lies prostrate at the feet of Britain, the right, basically he's saying the right will be denied to us to reconstruct Indian society on a new basis, whether socialistic or otherwise. We should first secure the right to shape our own destiny. So he was very clear. For him, the first paramount thing was freedom. We needed freedom from the British. And when you say freedom, there's one more interesting thing, as he says, India must fulfill her own destiny and cannot be content with colonial self-government or dominion status. So he says India is rich in resources, human, material. She has outgrown the infancy. And he says, but can India function as an independent unit? India is not Canada or Australia or South Africa. So he says we cannot accept home rule. And he says Indians are an Oriental people and there is nothing common between India and Great Britain. So basically he was dead against the dominion status, which means like being like under the Queen, the Commonwealth of England, like how today Canada or Australia is. But India is an independent nation, and nothing short of complete independence is what he advocated. So coming back, so he was, of course, and so what he says basically, as long as India lies prostrate at the feet of Britain, that right will be denied to us. He clearly says that it is therefore the paramount duty not only of nationalists, referring to the Congress, the Indian National Congress, but the communists, to bring about the political emancipation of India as early as possible. So he was completely in favor of labor and this working together, as I've said. So and let's now look at what he says about secularism. Pretty interesting. Yeah, so he goes on to say fanaticism. So basically, so he says about secularism, in order to facilitate cultural rapprochement, a dose of secular and scientific training is necessary. Fanaticism is the greatest thorn in the path of cultural intimacy, and there is no better remedy for fanaticism than secular and scientific education. This is what he says. So let's understand, friends, where he's coming from. He's very, very clear on secularism and socialism. And he says that cultural intimacy is needed. What he kind of says, I would urge the necessity of developing a deeper remedy for our communal troubles. Very interesting. He says, it is necessary for the different religious groups to be acquainted with the traditions, ideals, and history of one another, because cultural intimacy will pave the way towards communal peace and harmony. So friends, we can see, as some of the statements here put in this very interesting book, that Bose was dead secular and socialist. He wanted a secular republic, Indian National Republic, which was nothing to do with the British crown. He wanted sovereignty, and he said that there is a need for a bonding between the labor and basically the nationalists. So hope you got some idea of what Bose stood for and what Bose's republic would have looked if had he returned and had he been the leader of the Indian nation after 1947. So thanks for watching. Bharat Raghu signing off.